All right, good evening, Natalia. Thanks for waiting. Sorry for the lateness. I was finishing some details. I was starting with the class, but let's begin now. Please let me know how you are, please, Natalia.
Hi, I am okay. Thank you.
Great, that's great to know. Let's begin then, please, with the class. We have to go back to what we were doing. As always, Natalia, you know I like to work with reviews. So I want to know if you have any questions about the previous class. If not, I'm going to ask you some questions myself, mainly related to gerunds, right? We were able to see gerunds in all the forms we can use them, starting with being the subject, right? Being the object also, and being the object, you have more elements. But what do you say? Do you have any questions about gerunds? Let me know, please.
Not now. I
All
don't
right.
remember, but no, I don't have any question on my mind now.
Okay, good. That's good. All right. So remember, just keep practicing. Actually, we're going to leave that there then. It's important to review, but I just want you to try to remember by giving me just a couple of examples. And again, if you make a mistake, don't worry. That's why here we have to work reviews. The idea is that you have to remember that idea, okay? What example can you give me using a gerund as the subject of the sentence?
For example, going swimming is my favorite sport.
All right. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Yes, going swimming is my favorite sport, my favorite activity, my favorite hobby, my profession, anything, right? So great. That's good. That's one as subject. What about, again, it's not important to remember, but let's try so that we remember the most important verbs. I'm only going to ask you for one, but if you remember two, that's great. Do you remember any of the verbs that can be followed by gerund? What could it be? Just one would be great. If not, again, we're going to remember together.
I think cool.
One more time, please, Natalia.
Cool, made.
But those are models, right? Those are models. So models are always followed by the base, right? But verbs, I'm going to give you some of the verbs are related to advice. One verb is related to something you asked me, right? What is this word? And I told you, right? Is when you don't want to do something because it's bad for you, right? And then the other ones are something else. But do you remember any of those verbs?
Feel.
Okay, could be feel, but actually not only feel, that's an expression. It's the expression feel like, right? The two words have to be together. Feel like, only feel, no. Feel like, okay. Yes, that's expression, right? Good, one expression. And what about the verb? You can give me more expressions if you remember, okay? Expressions or verbs, that's one expression. Do you remember any other expressions or only verbs?
Is, are, no.
So let's remember together. Let's remember together. Remember that we don't use the verb to be with the gerund because it would be something else, right? That's going to be present participle, right? I am going. That's not present. That's not gerund, right? That's the present continuous, and that's the present participle, right? So remember, only after certain verbs, I'm going to tell you the most important ones. Enjoy, right? After enjoy, you always use gerund. Okay, try to remember those verbs. Enjoy. Why? Because if you use base verb, infinitive, or something else with enjoy, it's incorrect, right? For example, I always enjoy going to parties. She enjoys studying a lot. We enjoyed, right, being part of this project. Okay, so always the base. Then you have recommend and suggest, right? I suggest finishing it first. I recommend it, start it now. Okay, so suggest and recommend have to be followed by gerunds, right? And finally, the fourth, that is the most important one, avoid, right? I have to avoid eating fats. It's bad for my health, right? I have to avoid going to parties because I have to study, right? She has to avoid doing this and that. Okay, so gerunds. And remember some of the expressions you have can't help or can avoid, right? I can't help doing this. It means it's hard for you not to do that action. Then you have feel like, then to be worth, right? I feel like going to the movies. It means I want to go to the movies, right? So again, here we don't have to again practice that again, but remember those, all right? And now I just want you to give me please two examples, Natalia, just by speaking. Give me one example with one of the verbs that I mentioned and one example with one of the expressions, please. What do you say?
Uh, eh, mm, I have to avoid don't smoking. You don't smoking.
Sorry, in that case, remember, avoid. Avoid means when you don't want to do something, right? I can't avoid means that it's impossible to do doing something. So if you want to say that you cannot stop yourself from smoking, you have to say, I can't avoid smoking, right? Remember, you have to use gerund after avoid. I can't avoid smoking. But if you want to say actively that you, all right, want to avoid that action, you have to say, I have to avoid smoking because of my health. Okay, so you say, I can't avoid if you cannot control yourself. Okay, if you don't have control on your actions, on your thoughts, if you're addicted to something, you can say, I can't avoid doing this, right? I can't avoid smoking. It's a necessity that I got. All right, but again, that can be used negatively, I can't avoid, when you don't have control, or that can be used affirmatively when you say, I need to avoid doing this. I need to avoid smoking because it's bad for me. All right, so let's reformulate one more time your idea, please, Natalia. How would it be? Would it be affirmative, negative? But remember, after avoid, you need the gerund.
I need to avoid smoking.
Exactly. Very good, right? You can use any verb over there. In this case, it has to be affirmative. There you go. I have to avoid smoking. So we know, remember, after avoid, ing. I have to avoid smoking. I have to avoid going to parties. I have to avoid eating this. I have to avoid doing that, and so on and so forth. All right? Then one more, please. But now, avoid was the verb. What about an expression? What expression can you use? And remember, we have to use the gerund.
Playing my guitar is my hobby on these weeks.
Yes, that's good, but remember that's gerund as subject, and it's good. But remember, we have to use one of the expressions, right? And remember, the expressions can be to be busy, can be can avoid, or in this case, you already use can avoid, can help, right? Can be feel like, right? Can be to be worth, right? And also one is can stand or can bear, right? Those are the expressions. So what example can you use with one of those expressions?
I enjoy playing my guitar.
Okay, yes, that is with a verb, right? It's not an expression, but it's a verb and it's correct, right? I enjoy playing my guitar, or I always enjoy doing this or that. After enjoy, ing, right? And just as a reminder, if you want to use be busy, remember you have to say, I'm always busy doing my homework, right? Ing, gerund. When you want to say can't stand because you don't like something, I can't stand, I don't know, listening to this type of music, right? I can't stand listening to this type of music.
Mhm.
Then I can't help, it means I can't avoid, right? I can't help in what could it be, something that you cannot control, right? I can't help being, you can say, direct, or sometimes too direct, and so on and so forth. All right, you have the examples, but again, I'm just mentioning that again, Natalia, in order for you to remember, because you're going to see that gerunds are a very important part of the English structure, because they are
Mhm.
going to be everywhere. All right, I'm sure you're going to see them everywhere. So it's important that you remember. All right.
Mhm.
So that was a reminder. We spent some time over there, extra time, because again, gerunds can be a very important lessons with infinitives. Perhaps those, all right, can be one of the most important lessons to know in English, because you need to know what words you use with infinitives, what words with gerunds, because in every sentence that you give, all right, I can say 90% of the sentences, you're always going to use infinitive or gerund. Okay, so it's important to know which one is the best option or the correct option. So,
Mhm.
with that said, we also made an introduction for this, and this is the topic for today, right? And this is reflexive pronouns. Okay,
Mhm.
reflexive pronouns. We gave the introduction. I think it's more or less clear, but now we're going to practice. But with this here that you see in Natalia, what can you tell me about reflexive pronouns? What do you remember? And what can you tell me about these four elements that you see, plus these examples? Anything that you remember or comes to your mind, please.
Mm, I remember that you use these words for talk about yourself, doing an action, or maybe when the action is about you. Uh, and that's all. I remember that the
Okay, good.
colors is because there are different cases using the reflexive pronouns.
All right, good. Yes, over there we can add some extra things. That's what we're going to do now. But in general, I believe that's a good base. All right, I only have one correction, not in terms of the explanation. Explanation was good. But remember, if you say for talk about yourself, that's going to be incorrect. Right? Remember, you say to talk, right? To
Okay.
talk about yourself, right? It's a structure or a structure that you use to talk about yourself. Remember the rule. If you
Mhm.
have a preposition, always gerund. If you
Mhm.
don't have the preposition, we need the infinitive. And in this case, you need the infinitive. Okay, because the
Okay.
preposition for talking, again, as I told you, can be correct. But when you show purpose, right? We do this, and this is the reason, then you have to use to. All right. So we do this to talk about that, right? I
Mhm.
study English to travel there, to do this and that. Okay. So that's it. Great. Now let's remember together. Number one.
Mhm.
Okay. And we're going to use this because the presentation can be more confusing. And this is going to be more helpful. All right. Remember, the first way to use reflexive pronouns, Natalia, is when you do the action and when you receive the action, right? And that has to be literal, literal, right? Again, you can say, right, what's a slap? A slap is this, right? That's a slapping,
Mhm.
right? And again, you say, I slap myself, okay? It has to be literal. I do the action, I receive the action. If I have a mirror, I will say that also, right? You see the camera and you can see yourself in the camera, right? And you can say, I can see myself on the screen, right? And I'm literally seeing myself. Okay, so number one, and we're going to practice this now, Natalia. It's very simple, but it has to be like that. Don't tell me another object, right? Remember, it can be possible. You give me an example, right? I'm going to give something similar. I don't remember your exact example, but you say, I'm preparing dinner for myself,
Mhm.
right? And that's in a certain way good Because if your intention is that the action is for you, then it's also number one. Okay, it is correct. So it's also valid, but it is better if you say directly that you are the object. That's why in this example over here, you are the subject, I, and you are the object. In your example, you were here in the complement, right? I am preparing dinner for myself is the complement, but dinner is the object. So in a certain way is good, but is not following all the rules. Okay, so to follow all the rules, you have to be the object. You have to be the subject. It can be the same with he, right? He saw himself in the mirror, right? She saw herself, they saw themselves, and so on and so forth. All right, but that's number one. This is just the first one. I want this to be clear, Natalia. So I don't know if you have questions just about the first one, number one. The rest of them, we're going to practice them, but let's focus our attention here. What do you say? Any questions or doubts about this one?
I am trying to think in another example about the first point. I was thinking in no, I took a photo. I took a selfie of myself, a photo of me of myself. When I have to say, in this case, I take a photo of myself. How is the best option for that?
Yes, in that case, if you have to use an instrument to do it, as I told you, it is correct. There is no other way. Okay, it's impossible to say that just as you being the object, right? I perhaps you can say I photograph myself. Okay, you can say that I photograph myself, the action of taking photos. Okay, I photograph myself. But if you want to mention the instrument, it's also correct. You're going to be the complement, yes, but it's understood as this case because you are receiving the action. Okay, so it's still correct. Okay, so we're always going to try to look for this option, but sometimes, as in your example, Natalia, you're going to be the complement, but the sentence is still correct. Okay, and that what you say is correct. I'm taking a photo of myself. It's good, and it's also number one. Okay, because in this case, you have to mention another instrument, but you are still receiving the action. Okay, so it's good. It's good. Again, it can be an exception. It is better to make it like this, but there's always going to be exceptions as the one that you're telling me. All right, so let's do it, please. Actually, we are going to do it like this so that you understand what's the subject, the object, and the complement. So over here, down below, all right, you are going to write your examples. Only number one now, okay? Only number one, but we are going to have two examples for each. All right, so over there, please, Natalia. And again, I'm sharing the link so that you are here faster. And there you go. Okay, it's in the chat now. Let's use this chart, please, Natalia, to be two examples with number one. Okay, let's not use the same verb. I mean, saw, right? Let's use other verbs. And again, try to think of something physical in one of the examples, Natalia. Try to think how you can do actions to yourself. How can you use your senses to perceive yourself? All right, and it can be not only with your eyes, it can be with your ears, it can be with your skin, right? It can be with many different things that you feel when you do that to yourself. Okay, so try to think of one like that and the other one in the way that you want. Okay, two examples, please. Let's have 2 to 3 minutes, but if you finish before, please let me know.
Okay. always using the verb see?
No, actually, you don't have to use see. All right, you don't have to use so. Just in that example, Natalia, I was using see so that you can see in all the examples, you can use the same verb, but the meaning is going to be different. Okay, but in your examples, you don't have to use see, you have to use other verbs so that you explore more ideas.
Okay, but
Okay, that's just for the
there
example.
is a there is a list about verbs, specific verbs, or I can use.
You can use any verb as long as, again, is an action that you can do to yourself, Natalia. Right? As I was explaining to you, you can use verbs related to perception. Okay, I'm not telling you directly the verbs because I really want you to think of that, but try to think of perception, right? Remember, I told you, you can use your eyes, but you can use your ears, you can use your skin, right? Try to think of
Mm,
direct contact to yourself.
okay.
Okay, what, for example, singers do, right? Singers are covering one ear and they are singing, and there is that interaction there, right? Singers do this. You can use one verb related to singing, for example, right? Or to talking, or to speaking, or anything, again, for with perception, or with physical contact, direct physical contact. It can be soft, it can be hard, but again, it can be any verb, Natalia, as long as that's a verb and you're receiving that action. All right, that's the only requirement.
Okay. Mhm. I finish.
There you go. So let's read those two ideas, please, Natalia.
Mhm. The baby touched himself the sand for first time. My dog ate itself milk and liked it.
Okay, all right. Now let's try to think of something. Okay, now there, let's try to think something. If the ideas can be good, but analyze. Remember, in number one, you do the action and you receive the action. All right, and you receive the action. If you're saying the baby touched himself, after that part, perfect, right? So the baby is doing this, right? The baby is doing this, is touching himself. That's good. But if you're saying the sand, then he's not touching himself, he's touching the sand. So is he
Mm,
touching himself or is he touching the sand? If you say the
mhm.
sand, then this is not number one, right? This is something else. In order to be number one, you don't need an object. You are the object. The baby is the
Mhm.
object, not the sand. If you say the sand again, it is going to be incorrect. So you can simply say this, okay? And that's your sentence for the first time.
Mhm.
Okay, so in that case, you're saying that the baby, that is a male, touched herself exploring, right, his body for the first time,
Mhm.
not the sand, not anything else. Because if the baby touches something else, then this is not receiving the action, right? It's the same
Okay.
for number two, right? In number two, the same. If
Mm,
you say the dog ate himself, the dog is a cannibal, right? Or the dog is eating himself, right? Is eating himself.
mhm.
But then you say milk, and that's something else. Okay, that's another object. Remember, you
Okay.
don't need another object. The dog is the object. All right, the dog is the object.
Mm-hmm.
So here, let's try to change the verb, right? Because if it's ate, is correct. It makes sense, right? Some animals can eat themselves or can, right, bite themselves in order to be free from a trap or sometimes for very radical things, right? That's the case, but I don't think that's going to happen with the dog. So what can the dog do to itself? What do you say?
Walk.
Walk himself could be, but walk is a verb, it's an automatic verb naturally. If you say walked,
Mm-hmm.
worked as an active verb, Natalia, is when you walk your dog. Okay, you
Mm-hmm.
can walk your dog, right? You say, I walk my dog. It means I grab my dog and make him walk. Okay, but we don't say, right? We don't say I walk myself because to walk is automatically an automatic verb. It's a personal verb. Okay, so doing or saying himself or itself, it's not necessary. Okay, because
Mm-hmm.
you always walk. The dog walks, right? But
Mm-hmm.
if you say the dog walks himself, is
Mm-hmm.
it's valid. But remember, I don't know if you watched that video on TikTok, right? There's a dog grabbing something, and it's like the dog is walking himself without any master. All right. So if that's the case, if you're describing a dog grabbing his chain, right, and walking himself without any person, that's correct. Okay, but that's like a
Mm-hmm.
metaphor. That's even like comedy. All right, because
Mm-hmm.
again, it's like saying that the dog doesn't need any human to walk, because again, to walk is just to take your dog for a walk. Okay, that's the meaning. To walk
Mm-hmm.
something is to take something for a walk. Okay, and the dog cannot walk himself, but again, it can be just if you want to, again, say something metaphorically or describing something as comedy, as on TikTok, as I told, right? Dogs walking themselves. All right, but I don't know if you understand that point. In this case, then walk would be correct, but only as metaphor and as comedy, not as reality. With walk, we don't need to use a reflexive pronouns, right? Because we only walk. All right, we always walk, and that's an active verb. But
Mm-hmm.
you can say, right, the dog was scratching himself. Okay, it's doing that, right? So the
Okay.
dog scratches himself. So it has to receive, because if you analyze, the verb walk cannot receive an action. Walk, just as the action of walking, it doesn't have an object. Walk doesn't need an object, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless, again, you're using walking as taking your pet for a walk. Okay, that's the only way to use walk as an active verb. All right, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if you have questions about that. Let me know, please.
Is only can I use only the verbs have relationship with your senses?
No,
Uh,
not always. Again, I mean directly, yes, because you need to be in contact with yourself. But look at this. Imagine I'm going to tell you my experience. All right, I'm studying something, and I have a difficulty related to that thing I'm studying. I'm working on my thesis, and one of my options, again, and that's something that happened before, is that I wanted to be the object of my thesis. All right, because I have a problem and I wanted to study that problem as part of my thesis. So I could have said, I want to study myself as part of my thesis. Okay, so to
mhm,
study myself, that's not directly with senses, right? That's something more abstract, and that's good.
mm,
Also, love,
mhm,
right? Do you love yourself? That's number one. I love myself.
mhm,
If you love yourself, that's always a good first step. Okay, so not
mhm,
always with senses, it can be abstract, but remember, it has to be a verb that needs an object. Walk doesn't need an object only if walk has the translation that I wrote in the chat.
mhm,
Okay, in the chat, that's what you're telling me. If that's the
mhm,
case, okay, that's good. But again, it can be anything related to senses or absolutely anything abstract, but that has an object. All right, as the two examples that I told you. I wanted to study myself as part of my thesis, and I loving oneself is always the first step to love someone else. Right? So in
mhm,
those two cases, I'm using number one. I do the
mhm,
action, I receive the action in the two cases.
mhm.
All right, so it has to be like that. But remember, this is only number one. We have more alternatives with number 2, 3, and 4, but in number one, we need this requirement.
Okay. Mhm.
All right, good. I don't know if you have any other questions, Natalia. Let me know, please.
And no, not now. I try to write another example.
Okay, yes,
um,
let's do it. Think. Let's have 1 minute and try to think of the two ideas that I gave you. Try to think of anything that you do and again, and you receive, not anything else. Don't try to think of the context. You have to try to think on that person, on that animal, and something that that existence does to itself. Okay, not anything else, just oneself.
mhm,
All right, let's do it, please. 1 minute and let's check what you got.
mhm.
Good. I agree with that one, but I just add something there. If you say for his behavior, it's understandable, but it's not clear. You can say perhaps to understand his behavior, right? So he
Ah,
analyzes himself to understand his behavior, right? So in that way, the reason is clearer. Good. And
okay.
remember, it is going to be analyzes because this is third person, right? So you need an S.
Ah,
Analyzes. There you go. Exactly. Good. Perfect. Let's read that sentence, please, Natalia.
he analyzes himself to understand his behavior.
Exactly. Good. Right? So in that case, he's analyzing just himself, not anything else. The context doesn't matter in number one. The same person has to receive the action, not anything else.
Mhm,
All right, so that's great. Your two sentences there are perfect. Have that in mind, okay? Have that in mind, and you're never going to make mistakes with number one if you take that into account. You do,
mhm,
and you receive. Great. Let's go to number two, all right? In number two, remember that this is emphasis. Here, you are not receiving the action, Natalia, right? Here, you can mention other objects, as your example with the baby. Okay, in your example with the baby, you can say, the baby
mhm,
touched the sand for the first time.
mhm,
And you can say that to put emphasis on the idea that he did it, right? It was the baby. And you say, wow, really? That's a great step. Okay, because of a
mhm,
certain reason that can be important. Good. If it's important for you, if it's impressive, if it's different, if it's unique, remember the rule for number two, something different, impressive, or doing that personally, then you can use number two. Okay,
mhm,
you are not receiving the action. Something else receives the action. But, right, you use the reflexive pronoun because you're putting emphasis on the idea that that action is, again, unique, different, impressive, surprising, and blah, blah. All right,
mhm,
that's going to be the idea over there. That's why, again, here in your first example can work with number two. One more time, it can be the baby touched the
mhm.
sand for the first time. That will be good. And here you can say anything. Remember the example I gave you in the last class? I said, if I'm an artist, but I'm not a very good artist, but I painted something very impressive and now I'm famous, okay? Or at least my painting is famous.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and I have a conversation with my friends and I can tell them, hey, I painted that work of art myself. Okay, in
Mhm,
that case, I'm not receiving the action, I'm just saying that I did that action and it's impressive, right? Because I was not a good artist, but I got to paint that very impressive work of art. Okay,
mhm,
so anything that you consider, Natalia, again, one of those adjectives that I mentioned is going to be for number two. And remember, what is impressive is the entire action. And here again, you don't receive the action once again, but that's it. I don't know if you have questions with that about number two. Let me know, please. All right. If there
No.
are no questions, then we are going to work again with two examples, please, Natalia. All right, let's write two examples in which you are showing me that you're putting emphasis on the action. All right, on the action. And in that case, your reflexive pronoun, as you see over here, Natalia, has to be in the complement and your object has to be after the verb. Okay, we have to use that order. Let's do it, please. We check again in 2-3 minutes and we see how you did.
Okay. Okay, I finished.
Good. Let's read now those two examples, please, Natalia.
I won the lottery myself. She traveled around the world by herself.
All right. So the first one is good. All right. Number two, the second one, and Natalia, that's number four. That's the fourth case we're going to learn. Remember, by myself is not something impressive. It's not something different. It's not something unique. It only means alone. Here, the only thing you're telling me, she traveled around the world by herself. And again, of course, that can be impressive. But here, you're not saying that. Here, you're just saying she traveled around the world by herself. It means she traveled around the world alone. Okay, but that's the only
Okay.
meaning. But number two doesn't mean alone. Okay, number two doesn't mean alone. So we need, actually, you can fix this very easily. All right, you can do that. And if you do
Yes.
that, now the meaning is not the same, right? Here, now you don't say alone, you want to say, wow, she really traveled around the world. It's like saying that, okay? You are putting emphasis on the action that she did it, and it's like, wow. Okay, that's the only correction over there. And here it's good. Yes, you can say, I won the lottery myself. It means that, wow, it was really you, that you won it. Okay, so that's it. With that, I believe it's working good, Natalia. I don't know if you have any questions about the difference with by myself. We're going to see by myself now, but I don't know if you understand why here we don't use by myself.
Only if you put by myself, by herself, the meaning is changing for alone and you don't have the emphasis in the object, right?
Exactly. Correct. Exactly. Because if you want to use only myself or self, again, you can say something very impressive as this. All right, this is very impressive. So you can use herself. But if you simply want to say alone, you can say, I always go to the cinema alone. Right? That's not impressive. That it doesn't have to be impressive. All right. But you can say then I always go to the cinema by myself. Okay, so that's not emphasis, that's not impressive, that's just alone. That's it, right? Or I sometimes I do that. I like to go out on the weekends, and I go alone. All right, I go there, I go alone, and that's it, right? That's not impressive. So I can say I always go out alone. All right. So again, alone and by myself, by herself, it's the same. But again, if you say that, it's not going to be something impressive necessarily. It can be impressive, but not necessarily. All right. Good. So if you have more questions, let me know. If not, we're going to go to number three. And number three is also very easy. Remember that now with number three, Natalia, instead of talking about the action that is impressive, that receives emphasis, you're talking about one noun, only one noun. Okay, like in these two examples, Noelia herself, this is the attention we're putting, all right, on Noelia. Then saw the accident yesterday. That's good and that's great. But Noelia receives all the attention, okay, because we say Noelia herself. And here, I saw Donald Trump himself in the street. Okay, it's not that I saw him that is impressive, because I would have said, I saw Donald Trump myself, right, in the street. Then I'm putting emphasis on the action that I saw it, okay, that I saw him. Then the action is impressive that I did it. But in this case, the action is not impressive. The thing that I want to put emphasis on is Donald Trump, only Donald Trump, all right? So again, when you want to put emphasis on the noun, on the person, on the object, and not the entire action, you use this structure. The noun, and immediately after, the reflexive pronoun. Same here. The noun, in this case, two nouns, Donald Trump, and the reflexive pronoun. And as it is a noun, Natalia, of course, it can be the subject, it can be the object, it can be the complement, but mainly subject and complement. All right? Anything, it's possible here, Natalia, as long as you put it after that word, and as long as it's something interesting. Okay? And mainly here, you talk about someone very important, someone that you know very well, Natalia, or again, celebrities, famous people that can be recognized, or again, important people in general, like the president, or right, like the government could be, or anything again that is worth mentioning and worth putting emphasis on. Okay, but that's it. So that we have the time for the last one. I don't know if you have questions about number three. Let me know, please.
Always the reflexive pronoun is next to the object or the subject, depend of the emphasis.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
If your important person is the subject, then you have to put it here. If your important person is the object, you have to put it there. So always after the noun, okay? And nouns, not pronouns. Here you don't say she herself saw the accident yesterday. It's understandable, can be good, but it's not that correct. Okay, instead of she herself, it's better if you say the name. That's why you say emphasis on the noun, not the pronoun. Okay, on the noun. That's it. I don't know if you have more questions. If not, let's also work, please, on two examples here. In Natalia, I'm going to copy and paste it for you over here. There you go. So let's work on that, please. Two examples. One example as the subject and one example as the object, Natalia. All right, let's do it, please.
I finish.
Let's check. Sorry. Let's check them, please. Let's read your examples.
Maria herself is on the TV show right now. I asked Taylor Swift herself about an author.
Okay, all right. Yes, I believe it's working good. Here, the emphasis is being given to Maria, right? Maria herself is on the TV show right now, right? In this case, actually, just because of some grammar, this is going to be, both of them are going to be the complement, all right? Because they are actually here, we don't have an object, okay? But again, that's something extra, and it's great. Very good. And also this one, Taylor Swift herself. Of course, they want to eliminate that because they don't have the context, but it is great because you're putting emphasis on that it was really Taylor Swift. And that's the action, not the action, sorry, that's the person that is receiving the emphasis in this specific case. So yes, it is great, Natalia. I have no observations in this case. I don't know if you have any questions, please let me know.
Why you repeat on the TV show in object and complement? Is the same?
No, sorry, this I have to delete this. I was just
Okay.
changing the order because in this case on the TV show it's not going to be the object. It's just going to be the complement.
Okay.
So
don't
here,
have object. These sentences don't have object.
exactly. Some sentences and some verbs don't have objects. When you say, for example, I have to study tomorrow, right? In that case, I have to study, that's your verb. Or no, it's going to be I study every day. Okay, in I study every day is not the object, right? Because every day is not receiving the action of a study, right? So every day is just describing the situation, the day or the moment. So here, if you realize this is the case, on the TV show, it's not receiving the action of is. It's only describing the place and the time, okay? So any description of place and time, it's going to be over here unless you are that receives the action, okay? But that will be the explanation.
Okay.
All right, good. That's the number 3. We're just missing number 4, that it's the easiest, Natalia. So we're going to finish on time. In these last minutes, remember that by myself, that's number 4, right? Synonym of alone. When you place by before the reflexive pronoun, it means alone. That's it. So anytime you want to say alone, you can say by myself because it's just a synonym. I went to the party. That's not impressive. That's not anything. I'm just saying that I did that action alone. That's it. Okay, so let's try it with that 2 examples, Natalia. But again, if you have questions, let me know. But there's no more complexity with this. There's not any extra meaning. There's not anything else that changes. You can say here alone, and the meaning is exactly the same. You're not talking about impressive actions. You're not talking about doing and receiving. So again, none of the previous examples, 1, 2, or 3, apply here. Number 4 is just an exception, and it's another way to say this word. That's the only explanation for number 4. All right, I don't know if you have questions about that. Let me know, please.
Only you can use by yourself, by myself, for as a synonym for alone, of alone.
Only in that case. That's the only function that by has. If not, you don't have to use by. Only use by and reflexive pronoun when you want to say alone, because that's the only meaning.
Okay.
All right, good. Let's do it, please. 2 examples down below with alone, or in this case, by myself, by oneself. We check that and we finish the class with that.
Okay. Okay, I finished.
Good. Let's read those examples. Let's see if they are okay to finish, please, Natalia.
I designed my dress by myself, and he paid our check by himself.
Okay. Yes. Yes. That's great. Again, both cases, if it makes sense to say alone, they are correct. So we check. I designed my dress alone. Good, right? It makes sense. Yes. It is possible. Yes. So it's correct. He paid our check. It's also good to say our check, right? You can say his check, but it can be our check if you're a couple, if you're a family, if you're friends, right? It's possible. So he paid our check by himself. It's also good, right? He paid our check alone. That's also correct. Okay, so any situation in which alone makes sense as the synonym, it works and it shows that it is correct. In this case, they are correct. And that's it. All right. These are the four ways you have to use the reflexive pronouns, Natalia. Okay. So you can see
Okay.
that this can be complex. All right. I mean, it's not hard, but it can be complex. And you need to understand that you have these four possibilities with reflexive pronoun. And you have to be careful, right? You have to be careful because the place of this, if it's here or if it's here, is going to change the meaning of the word, of the entire sentence. Also here, if you say by myself, right, as I said before, it's going to be good, but the meaning is going to be different. All right, so just small changes and the places of, well, the placement of those words can change the meaning of the entire idea. Okay, that's why it's important to take this chart into account, because this chart is showing you where you place these elements and how they work. All right, that's it. I don't know if you have any final questions to be finishing today's class, Natalia. Let me know, please.
No, thank you for the refresh of the class, of the last class.
Great. No, no worries. And again, remember, actually, that this was like really the lesson, right? Because in the previous classes was the introduction, but we couldn't practice, right? So it was the introduction, and now we finished and completed the lesson. So it was kind of a new lesson. Of course, we practiced most of it, and we covered a big introduction on Friday, but today we're really covering this lesson. Okay, so it was really good. There you go. So let's please then upload, or not upload, let's please fill out the survey that you see over there. And that's it. Then we will continue our next lesson on Friday. All right. I hope you have a good night, and I'll see you then, Natalia.
Yes, thank you.
You're
See you.
welcome. Bye bye. Good night.
Bye.